My wife spent all our savings on her boyfriend, so I took revenge in silence and bankrupted them both. The story begins when Micah Wells discovered that his 15-year savings account had been completely drained. While his wife Serena lay beside him in bed, pretending to sleep, her phone buzzed constantly with messages from her boyfriend, Javon Price. Micah felt like someone had just plunged a knife straight into his heart. But instead of screaming or confronting them, he chose silence and began crafting a sophisticated revenge plan they would never see coming. Within 6 months, both Serena and Javon would lose everything, their money, reputation, and future. And they would finally understand that their greed had awakened something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're ready for the next part, like the video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from: San Diego, Portland, Seattle, or maybe Atlanta. Now let's see how Micah's silent revenge begins to unfold. The repo truck's engine growled to life at 6:15 in the morning, its hydraulic whine cutting through the quiet suburban street. Micah Wells stood at his kitchen window, watching Javon Price's midnight blue BMW X5 get hoisted onto the flatbed like a caught fish. Steam rose from his untouched coffee cup as he savored this first small victory. Behind him, Serena's bare feet slapped against the hardwood as she rushed to the front window. Her silk nightgown, the expensive one he'd bought her last Christmas, clung to her frame as she pressed her face against the glass. The phone in her hand buzzed incessantly. Javon's name flashed on the screen with each desperate call. "What the hell is happening?" she whispered, her voice cracking. She dialed again. "Baby, pick up. They're taking your car. Pick up." Micah remained perfectly still, his reflection ghost-like in the window. 6 months ago, he would have comforted her. 6 months ago, he would have believed whatever story she spun about helping family or covering emergencies. 6 months ago, he'd been a fool. The discovery had happened on a Sunday morning. Their weekly financial check-in had become routine. Coffee, spreadsheets, planning for the house they'd never buy now. When the banking app loaded, the savings account balance read $31,000. It should have been $127,000. His hands had trembled as he scrolled through months of unauthorized transfers, each one approved with a shared password, each one another nail in his marriage's coffin. But Micah was a risk analyst by training and temperament. Emotional reactions led to poor decisions. Legal evidence led to justice. Serena finally turned around, tears streaming down her face. She froze when she saw him standing there, watching her with the calm detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. In his left hand, he held a manila envelope. In his right, his phone displayed a timeline he'd spent months perfecting. Every transaction, every lie, every secret meeting documented with forensic precision. "Game over," he said quietly, extending the envelope toward her. Her face went pale as she recognized the legal letterhead through the manila paper. "Micah, I can explain. No need." His voice carried the same tone he used in board meetings when rejecting bad investment proposals. "Everything's already been explained. Your boyfriend's financing fell through. Hard money lenders don't like uncertainty about income sources." Serena's mouth opened and closed like a drowning woman gasping for air. The phone in her hand buzzed again. Javon, probably wondering why his financial world was crumbling. She had no idea this was just the opening move. "You've been watching us." It wasn't a question. "I've been protecting my assets." Micah set his coffee cup on the counter with surgical precision. 15 years of marriage, Serena. 15 years of trust. You flushed it away for a personal trainer who can't even spell collateral correctly. The BMW's taillights disappeared around the corner, taking with it the first tangible symbol of their betrayal. Javon would wake up in an hour to discover his dream of opening a fitness studio had become a nightmare of unpaid loans and broken promises. But they wouldn't understand the full scope of what was coming until much later. Serena clutched the divorce papers to her chest like armor that might protect her from the consequences rushing toward them both. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." Micah checked his watch. 6:43. In exactly 17 minutes, his attorney would file additional paperwork that would freeze their remaining joint accounts. Long enough to plan accordingly. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Cassandra Brooks, attorney. Right on schedule. 8 years earlier, Micah had been sitting in the same corner booth at Murphy's Coffee House when Serena walked in, shaking raindrops from her umbrella. She'd ordered a vanilla latte with extra foam and somehow managed to spill half of it on his financial journals while apologizing profusely. Her laugh had been genuine then, musical and unguarded, nothing like the calculated sweetness he'd grown accustomed to lately. "I'm Serena," she'd said, dabbing at his soggy papers with coffee shop napkins. "And I'm apparently a walking disaster." "Micah Wells," he'd replied, watching her try to salvage his risk assessment charts. "And you just improved my morning considerably." Their courtship had been built on shared dreams and complementary strengths. She brought creativity to his analytical world. He brought stability to her spontaneous nature. As a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm downtown, Serena understood ambition. When Mike explained his 30% savings rate and their timeline for home ownership, she'd not only supported the plan, but contributed ideas for accelerating it. $300,000, she'd said during one of their early Sunday morning planning sessions, her finger tracing property listings spread across their kitchen table. "We could have that house in Brookhaven within 3 years if we stick to the budget." Those Sunday mornings had become sacred. Coffee brewing, spreadsheets updating, dreams taking shape in concrete numbers. Micah would review their accounts while Serena prepared her famous blueberry pancakes. They'd watch Netflix afterward, usually some mindless comedy that made her snort with laughter. Simple pleasures that built a marriage. The transparency had been Micah's idea. No financial secrets, he'd told her when they'd opened their joint accounts. Complete access, complete trust. "We're partners in everything now." He'd shared every password, every investment strategy, every long-term goal. The password to their savings account, Serena Love 2016, chosen to commemorate their wedding year, had seemed romantic then. Micah's position as a senior risk analyst at Peachtree Regional Bank provided steady income of $85,000 annually. Every Friday, he'd transfer their predetermined savings amount, $2,550, into their joint account. Serena contributed her portion religiously, $1,800 from her marketing salary. Together, they'd built something neither could achieve alone. The first crack had been subtle. 3 years into their marriage, Serena started working later. "Campaign season," she'd explain, kissing his cheek as she grabbed her gym bag. "You know how it is." He'd believed her because marriage required trust, and trust required faith in your partner's explanations. The gym membership had been her suggestion. "I need to stay in shape for work," she'd said, showing him the sleek brochure for elite fitness downtown. Image matters in marketing. The monthly fee was reasonable, $139, and her happiness mattered more than the budget variance. Looking back, Micah could trace the exact moment their Sunday morning ritual began dying. Serena stopped suggesting menu items for their meal planning. She'd check her phone constantly during their financial reviews, claiming work emergencies. The blueberry pancakes became frozen waffles, then nothing at all. "Emergency loan for cousin," read the memo on their first major withdrawal. $3,200 to help family with medical bills. Micah had approved it immediately, proud that his wife cared enough about family to sacrifice their house fund. He'd had no idea he'd just made the first payment toward his own betrayal. The withdrawal started small and came wrapped in family emergencies that tugged at Micah's generous heart. Serena had always been close to her extended family, or so he'd believed. Her cousin needed surgery, her aunt couldn't make rent, her mother's medical bills were piling up. Each crisis arrived with perfect timing, just when their savings account had recovered from the previous emergency. "It's just temporary," Serena would say, her hand resting on his shoulder as he reluctantly approved another transfer. "Family takes care of family, right? We'll get it back once things stabilize." Micah's training as a risk analyst should have triggered alarms when the requests escalated from monthly to weekly, then to twice weekly. But marriage operated on different mathematics than financial markets. Love required faith, and faith meant trusting your partner's explanations even when the numbers started looking suspicious. January brought a $4,800 emergency for her mother's supposed cardiac procedure. February demanded $6,500 for her cousin's car accident settlement. March required $8,200 for her sister's divorce attorney fees. Each story arrived with enough emotional detail to forestall deeper questions. Serena would cry real tears explaining how grateful her family was, how they'd pay it back soon, how proud she was to have a husband generous enough to help. The pattern became routine with horrifying efficiency. Serena would receive a panicked phone call during dinner. paced the kitchen while whispering urgently about medical bills or legal troubles, then approached Micah with eyes red from tears and a specific dollar amount already calculated. She'd transfer the money while he watched, using their shared laptop and the password he'd created as a romantic gesture. By April, Micah had begun maintaining a private spreadsheet tracking their hemorrhaging savings. March 15th, $6,500 to Serena's cousin. March 22nd, $4,200 for her aunt's emergency surgery. March 31st, $3,800 for her mother's prescription medications. The amounts had grown bolder as Serena's confidence increased. Their Sunday morning financial reviews became tense affairs dominated by Serena's defensive explanations about temporary setbacks and family obligations. She'd flipped through property listings with forced enthusiasm, while Micah stared at their dwindling balance. Their dream house in Brookhaven felt like it was floating further away with each emergency transfer. "We'll rebuild it," Serena promised, her fingers drumming nervously against the kitchen table. "Once everyone gets back on their feet, we'll catch up quickly. Maybe we could delay the house purchase by just 1 year." The woman who used to arrive home energized from work now returned exhausted and distracted. Gym sessions that once lasted an hour stretched to 2, then 3. Phone calls that used to happen in their shared space moved to the bedroom behind closed doors. When Micah suggested joining her at Elite Fitness, she quickly explained that her trainer preferred working with individual clients. "Javon has this whole personalized program designed just for me," she'd said, avoiding eye contact. "It wouldn't really work for couples training." The name hadn't registered as significant then, just another detail in the growing collection of explanations that individually seemed reasonable, but collectively formed a troubling pattern. Micah filed it away in the corner of his mind, where uncomfortable truths waited for proper examination. Late April brought the moment that changed everything. Sitting at his desk reviewing their monthly statements, Micah calculated their remaining balance against their original goal. $127,000 had become $31,000 in 4 months. Even in the volatile world of financial risk assessment, such rapid capital erosion indicated systematic rather than circumstantial problems. Something was fundamentally wrong, and his wife's family emergencies were just the beginning. Marcus Cooper arrived at Micah's office on a Tuesday morning, wearing an unremarkable gray suit and carrying the kind of leather portfolio that suggested competence without flash. The private investigator had been recommended by a colleague who'd used his services during a contentious business partnership dissolution. $2,000 up front would buy 30 days of surveillance and documentation, a bargain price for discovering the truth. "Standard infidelity investigation," Cooper explained, sliding a contract across Micah's desk. "Video surveillance, financial records cross-reference, behavioral pattern analysis. Most cases resolve within 2 weeks, but I always quote a full month to manage expectations." Micah signed without hesitation. His analytical mind craved data, and Cooper promised facts instead of the emotional quicksand that marriage had become. Within 72 hours, the first report landed in his secure email folder, along with photographic evidence that transformed suspicion into devastating certainty. Elite Fitness downtown featured floor-to-ceiling windows that made surveillance almost effortless. Cooper's telephoto lens captured Serena arriving at 2:30 every weekday afternoon, 30 minutes before her supposed 5 o'clock training sessions. The first photos showed her entering the building in workout clothes. The second set, time-stamped an hour later, showed her leaving in the same outfit but with different hair and makeup. The subtle changes of someone who'd spent time in an intimate setting rather than a gym. The man in the photographs looked exactly like someone who'd seduce a married woman with financial access. Javon Price, 28 years old, stood 6 feet 3 inches with the sculpted physique that personal training provided. His BMW X5, photographed in the gym's parking lot during every one of Serena's visits, carried a base price tag of $65,000. The Rolex Submariner on his wrist retailed for $12,000. Neither purchase aligned with typical personal trainer income. Cooper's financial background check revealed the source of Javon's sudden prosperity. His bank deposits showed irregular but substantial cash influxes that corresponded exactly with Serena's family emergency withdrawals. March 15th, $6,500 deposited into Javon's checking account, the same day Serena's cousin allegedly needed surgery money. March 22nd, $4,200 deposited, matching her aunt's emergency surgery fund. The audio recordings of Ion, obtained through Georgia's one-party consent laws when Cooper posed as a potential client, provided the emotional devastation that financial records couldn't capture. Serena's voice, clear and unmistakable, echoed through Micah's headphones with casual cruelty that made his chest tighten. "Micah is just my ATM," she'd told her friend during lunch at the bistro downtown. "He's so focused on his spreadsheets and risk assessments that he can't see what's happening right in front of him. I just mention family drama, and he hands over whatever I ask for." Javon's response, captured during the same recording session, stripped away any remaining illusions about their relationship's nature. "That fool is funding our future, baby. My studio is going to be successful because your husband's too stupid to notice his money's building our dreams. Keep milking him until we're ready to make our move." The recordings continued for 37 minutes, detailing their plans for Javon's fitness studio expansion, their private weekend getaways funded by emergency loans, and their amusement at Micah's trusting nature. They spoke about him like he was a resource to be exploited, rather than a human being who'd shared 8 years of genuine love and partnership. Cooper's final report included one additional detail that transformed heartbreak into strategic opportunity. Javon had applied for a $50,000 small business loan using projected income figures that assumed continued access to Serena's family emergency fund. The fitness studio lease required personal guarantees from both Javon and any financial backers. The trap was already building itself. Micah just needed to provide the right leverage to make it snap shut. The evidence files sat spread across Micah's home office desk like pieces of a puzzle that revealed a picture he'd never wanted to see. Bank statements, surveillance photos, audio transcripts, each document another nail in the coffin of his marriage. Outside, Atlanta's evening traffic hummed past their suburban street, while inside, Micah felt his heart being systematically crushed and rebuilt into something harder. 8 years of shared dreams reduced to transaction records and timestamp logs. The woman sleeping in their bed upstairs had called him an ATM, a fool, a resource to be drained. Every family emergency had been fiction. Every tearful plea had been performance art designed to fund another man's lifestyle. The mathematical precision of her betrayal impressed even his analytical mind. But beneath the devastation, something colder was crystallizing. Micah Wells had built a career on understanding risk and reward, on anticipating market behavior, and preparing for multiple scenarios. His marriage might be dead, but his strategic mind was very much alive. They thought he was stupid. That mistake would cost them everything. The decision formed with the same methodical clarity he brought to complex financial assessments. No emotional confrontations, no desperate attempts at reconciliation, no dramatic scenes that would give them time to prepare defenses or hide assets. Instead, he would construct their downfall with the same patience and precision they'd used to construct his humiliation. Cassandra Brooks accepted his retained services during a Thursday morning meeting at her downtown law firm. $300 per hour, bought expertise in complex divorce litigation, asset protection, and forensic accounting. Her preliminary assessment confirmed Micah's instincts. Georgia's divorce laws would favor the wrong party, especially with documented evidence of financial fraud. Unauthorized access to joint accounts constitutes theft under state law, Brooks explained, reviewing Cooper's financial timeline. The audio evidence establishes intent to defraud. We can pursue criminal charges alongside the civil divorce proceedings if you choose. Not yet, Micah replied. I want them to dig deeper first. Janet Kim, the forensic accountant Brooks recommended, specialized in tracing hidden assets and reconstructing financial crimes. Her preliminary analysis revealed the scope of Javon and Serena's operation. $89,000 transferred over 6 months, each transaction carefully timed to avoid triggering automatic bank alerts. They'd been more sophisticated than typical affair partners, but not sophisticated enough to fool professional investigation. They're getting comfortable, Kim observed during their consultation. The amounts are increasing, and the intervals are shortening. Classic overconfidence pattern. Give them more rope, and they'll hang themselves. Micah returned home that evening with his strategy crystallized into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1. Continue gathering evidence while maintaining normal behavior. Phase 2. Create opportunities for Javon and Serena to overextend themselves financially. Phase 3. Deploy legal and financial consequences simultaneously to maximize damage. The most difficult part would be the performance. Sitting across from Serena at dinner, watching her fabricate concern for his day while planning her next withdrawal required acting skills he'd never needed before. But every false smile she gave him, every manufactured crisis she would present, every dollar she would steal, it would become evidence in the case that would destroy her comfortable life. "You seem quiet tonight," Serena said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Everything okay at work?" "Just tired," Micah replied, allowing her fingers to intertwine with his. Busy month ahead. She had no idea how busy it would become. Tomorrow he would implement phase 2 by creating the perfect bait, an emergency fund she couldn't resist touching. $20,000 in a money market account that existed solely to document one final act of theft. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. They would steal money that didn't legally belong to them, providing irrefutable evidence of criminal intent. His phone buzzed with a text from Cooper. "Subject meeting with a loan officer tomorrow at 2 p.m. Financial overextension accelerating." Perfect timing. Greed would make them reckless, and recklessness would give him everything he needed to end this. The fake email took Micah 15 minutes to compose and format perfectly. Subject line, Q2, performance bonus notification, confidential. The message detailed a $25,000 bonus payment expected within 2 weeks, complete with fabricated approval codes and executive signatures. He left the laptop open on their kitchen counter at exactly the angle where Serena would see the screen when she returned from her training session. The performance began at 6:30 when she walked through the front door, gym bag slung over her shoulder, and the satisfied glow of someone who'd spent the afternoon doing anything except exercise. Her eyes swept the kitchen with practiced casualness, cataloging details for future manipulation opportunities. The laptop screen drew her attention like honey draws flies. "What's this about a bonus?" she asked, pointing at the email with manufactured excitement. 25,000, baby? That's amazing." Micah turned from the stove where he was preparing dinner, letting worry lines crease his forehead. "I'm not sure we should count on it yet. There's some complicated investment opportunity the bank's considering. High risk, high reward situation. I've got 2 weeks to decide whether to commit our liquid assets." The hook was perfectly baited. Serena's pupils dilated slightly as she processed the implications. $25,000 sitting in limbo, waiting for a decision that might never come. Money that could disappear into legitimate investments unless she acted quickly. What kind of investment? Her voice carried the forced casualness of someone trying to hide desperate interest. "Municipal bond restructuring project. Minimum buy-in of $30,000, but the returns could be significant if it succeeds." Micah stirred the pasta sauce while delivering his performance. "I'm just nervous about tying up so much capital without guarantees." Over the following 48 hours, Serena's behavior shifted with textbook predictability. The woman who'd grown distant and distracted suddenly became attentive and affectionate. She cooked his favorite meals, initiated conversations about their future together, and displayed the kind of romantic attention that had been missing for months. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from Javon, each message adding pressure to their increasingly desperate situation. Through Cooper's ongoing surveillance, Micah knew the fitness studio lease required a $10,000 security deposit by month's end. Javon's loan application had been approved conditionally, pending verification of stable income sources. "My mom called today," Serena announced during dinner on Friday night, her voice carrying the familiar tremor that preceded major withdrawal requests. "She needs another $8,000 for her physical therapy treatments. The insurance company is being difficult about coverage." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced smoothness, but Micah detected subtle differences this time. Her breathing was slightly elevated, her left hand fidgeted with her wedding ring. The stress of knowing about the bonus money was affecting her performance quality. $8,000 is a lot right now," Micah replied carefully, "especially with the investment opportunity hanging over us. Maybe we could do $5,000 and see if that helps?" Serena's face tightened almost imperceptibly. She really needs the full amount. The therapy clinic requires payment up front for the complete treatment program. "Okay," Micah conceded with apparent reluctance, "but this has to be the last emergency for a while. We can't keep bleeding money when investment opportunities are presenting themselves." The transfer happened that evening, $8,000 flowing from their joint account into Serena's personal account, then immediately moving to Javon's business account according to Cooper's banking surveillance. Within 24 hours, Javon had made the studio security deposit and signed lease agreements that would bind him to 18 months of financial obligations. Sunday morning brought the text message that confirmed Phase 2's success. Javon's lender had requested additional collateral documentation. His projected income statements, based on continued access to Serena's emergency funds, were about to be stress tested by professionals who understood the difference between legitimate business plans and fantasy projections. They had $12,000 in liquid assets remaining. Javon had committed to lease payments of $4,200 monthly. The mathematics of their situation were becoming impossible, but greed had made them blind to arithmetic. The trap was armed and waiting. Desperation made people careless, and Javon Price was becoming very careless very quickly. Cooper's surveillance reports showed him meeting with Marcus Reed, a hard money lender who specialized in high-risk business loans for borrowers that traditional banks wouldn't touch. 18% annual interest, personal asset guarantees required, and a collection process that didn't involve polite phone calls when payments were missed. The $30,000 loan Javon secured on Tuesday morning would cover his studio's equipment purchases and first-quarter operating expenses. What it wouldn't cover was the mathematical impossibility of his situation. $4,200 in monthly lease payments plus loan servicing costs that exceeded his actual earning potential, but greed had convinced him that Serena's emergency fund would continue flowing indefinitely. "If it helps your family, we can figure it out," Micah told Serena when she presented her latest crisis on Wednesday evening. His voice carried exactly the right mixture of resignation and support. "I just hope these medical emergencies end soon. We're stretching pretty thin." Serena's relief was palpable as she transferred another $6,500, this time for her cousin's supposed legal troubles. She had no idea that Micah was recording every conversation about money transfers using an app that Georgia's one-party consent laws made perfectly legal. Her grateful kiss on his cheek felt like betrayal in reverse. He was deceiving the deceiver, manipulating the manipulator. "You're the best husband in the world," she whispered against his ear. "My family would be lost without your generosity." The recording device captured every word, adding them to a growing collection of evidence that would soon paint her as a calculating thief rather than a loving wife helping family members. But the real prize came Thursday afternoon when Javon's overconfidence finally pushed him past the point of recoverable stupidity. Cooper's directional microphone, positioned outside Elite Fitness during Serena's training session, captured the conversation that would seal both their fates. Through the gym's open windows, their voices carried clearly enough for high-quality audio documentation. "Your husband is pathetic." Javon's voice filtered through the equipment with crystal clarity. "Does he even know he's paying for my Rolex, for the BM, for everything we're building together?" Serena's laughter was sharp and cruel. "He's completely clueless. Yesterday he was worried about our budget while I transferred another $6,000. He actually thanked me for being so caring about family." "Keep playing the devoted wife angle," Javon continued. "Once my studio is profitable, we won't need his money anymore. Then you can decide whether you want to divorce him or just keep draining him dry." The recording continued for 12 more minutes, documenting their plans for expanded business operations, vacation getaways funded by emergency loans, and their shared amusement at Micah's trusting nature. They spoke about financial projections that assumed indefinite access to his savings, about lifestyle upgrades they'd purchased with his hard-earned money, about the satisfaction of fooling someone they considered intellectually inferior. But the most damaging evidence came from Javon's casual mention of their backup plan. "If your husband ever gets suspicious, we'll just say the family emergencies were real and you were helping out of the goodness of your heart." What's he going to do? Investigate his own wife? The irony was delicious. At that exact moment, Cooper was photographing them together through telephoto lenses while recording devices documented their criminal conspiracy. Micah had been investigating his own wife for 6 weeks, building a legal case that would leave them both financially devastated and socially ruined. Friday morning brought the bank statement that confirmed their overextension was complete. Total transfers, $89,000 over 6 months. Javon's business obligations, $73,000 in lease guarantees and loan commitments. Their remaining liquid assets, less than $3,000. The mathematics were perfect. They had stolen everything they could steal and committed to obligations they couldn't possibly meet. Now came the collection phase. Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, Cassandra Brooks filed the divorce petition at Fulton County Superior Court, along with an emergency motion for asset preservation. The timing was surgical. Serena would be at Elite Fitness for her regular session with Javon, surrounded by witnesses when the sheriff's deputy arrived with legal papers that would turn their private betrayal into public spectacle. Simultaneously, Micah triggered the fraud investigation he'd been preparing for weeks. His contact at the bank's security department received a comprehensive package documenting unauthorized transfers from their joint account, complete with audio evidence establishing criminal intent. Financial institutions took theft seriously, especially when the documentation was presented with professional precision. The forensic accounting report that Janet Kim submitted to the court read like an autopsy of their marriage. $89,000 systematically diverted over 6 months. Each transaction traced to its ultimate destination in Javon's business accounts. Timeline correlation between Serena's family emergency claims and subsequent deposits into her boyfriend's bank account. Mathematical proof of conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Cooper's surveillance team captured the moment everything began unraveling. Serena was stretching on a yoga mat when Deputy Martinez approached with official papers requiring her signature. The color drained from her face as she read the divorce petition's opening paragraphs, which detailed her unauthorized access to marital assets for the purpose of funding an extramarital affair. "Ma'am, you need to sign here acknowledging receipt," Martinez said, his voice carrying throughout the gym's main floor. Other members slowed their workouts to observe the drama unfolding near the free weights section. Javon rushed over from the squat rack where he'd been training another client, his face darkening as he realized their secret relationship was being documented in legal papers served in full public view. "What's going on here?" "Divorce proceedings," Martinez replied matter-of-factly. "Asset preservation order, effective immediately. All joint accounts are frozen pending court review." The words hit Javon like physical blows. Frozen accounts meant no more emergency transfers, no more family crisis funding, no more access to the money that had been subsidizing his lifestyle and business expansion. The BMW payments, the studio lease, the hard money loan servicing, all of it depended on cash flow that had just been legally terminated. Within hours, the ripple effects began cascading through their carefully constructed deception. Marcus Reed, the hard money lender, received an anonymous tip about income source instability affecting his borrower's ability to service the $30,000 loan. Anonymous tips that happened to include copies of bank statements showing Javon's deposits had come from a joint account now frozen by court order. Reed's collection protocols activated immediately. Personal guarantees meant personal liability. When borrowers couldn't make payments, hard money lenders seized collateral without the courtesy delays that traditional banks provided. The BMW that had symbolized Javon's success became the first target for asset recovery. Serena called Micah 17 times that afternoon, each voicemail more frantic than the last. "Please call me back. We need to talk about this. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. The lawyers are saying things that aren't true." But Micah was at his attorney's office, reviewing the criminal complaint that would be filed if Serena refused to cooperate with asset recovery. Georgia's theft laws applied to unauthorized use of joint funds when criminal intent could be established. The audio recordings of her calling him an ATM while planning to drain him dry certainly qualified as criminal intent. "The court will require full restitution plus legal fees," Brooks explained. $89,000 in stolen funds, plus approximately $15,000 in investigation and legal costs. If she can't make immediate payment, we proceed with criminal charges. Cooper's evening surveillance report confirmed that Phase 3 was proceeding perfectly. Javon had received foreclosure notice for his studio lease after missing the first payment due to frozen cash flow. The fitness equipment he'd purchased with the hard money loan was being prepared for immediate resale to cover outstanding debts. They had exactly 14 days to find over $100,000, or their lives would collapse completely. The collection phase had begun. The Fulton County Courthouse at 8:30 on a Tuesday morning hummed with the efficiency of justice being systematically dispensed. Judge Patricia Hernandez had built her reputation on no-nonsense handling of complex financial disputes, and the case file spread across her bench represented exactly the kind of documented fraud that made legal decisions straightforward. Cassandra Brooks approached the plaintiff's table with the confidence of someone carrying overwhelming evidence. 6 months of investigation had produced a timeline so detailed and damaging that Serena's attorney, James Crawford, had already suggested his client consider a settlement rather than endure public humiliation in open court. "Your Honor," Brooks began, activating the courtroom's audio system, "the evidence will show systematic theft of marital assets over 6 months, totaling $89,000, transferred to fund defendant's extramarital affair." The first audio recording filled the courtroom with Serena's voice, clear and unmistakable. "Micah is just my ATM. He's so focused on his spreadsheets and risk assessments that he can't see what's happening right in front of him." Judge Hernandez's expression shifted from professional neutrality to visible disapproval as the recording continued. 12 years on the family court bench had exposed her to various forms of marital deception, but the casual cruelty in Serena's voice was particularly stark. Crawford objected weakly to the audio evidence, claiming privacy violations, but Georgia's one-party consent laws made the recordings perfectly admissible. His client had condemned herself in her own words, describing her husband as a fool while detailing her systematic theft of their shared savings. The defendant characterized her husband as an automated teller machine. Brooks continued, displaying bank transaction records on the courtroom's overhead screen. "These transfers correlate exactly with her claimed family emergencies, but forensic accounting shows the money went directly to her boyfriend's business accounts." Javon Price sat in the gallery's back row, watching his financial world collapse in real time. Reed's collection team had already repossessed his BM and initiated foreclosure proceedings on the studio lease. His business dreams were being auctioned off to satisfy creditors who had discovered their borrowers' income projections were based entirely on stolen money. The photographic evidence drew audible gasps from the courtroom observers. Cooper's surveillance images showed Serena and Javon entering hotels during her supposed gym sessions, dining at expensive restaurants while her husband worked late to maintain their household budget, shopping for luxury items using money transferred under the pretense of family medical emergencies. "Your Honor," Crawford attempted damage control, "my client was genuinely helping family members through difficult times. The relationship with Mr. Price developed later and was not the motivation for these transfers." Judge Hernandez consulted the timeline Brooks had submitted. "Counselor, the evidence shows your client's first transfer to her boyfriend's account occurred 3 days after her initial family emergency claim. Unless her cousin's surgery was performed at a personal training studio, your explanation lacks credibility." The courtroom erupted in nervous laughter that Serena felt like physical slaps across her face. She had dressed conservatively for court, hoping to project the image of a wronged wife rather than a calculating thief, but the evidence was destroying any possibility of sympathy. Brooks called Javon to testify about the source of his business funding. Under oath, he had no choice but to admit receiving money from his girlfriend's husband, confirming the audio recordings that described Micah as their unwitting investor. "So you used funds that belonged to the plaintiff to purchase a BM and establish your business?" Brooks asked. "Yes, but you thought stealing money was acceptable as long as the victim didn't notice." Crawford's objection was overruled. Judge Hernandez had heard enough evidence to render judgment that would satisfy both civil and criminal justice. Serena was liable for full restitution of $89,000 plus Micah's legal expenses totaling $15,000. She would retain 20% of their marital assets and face potential criminal prosecution if restitution wasn't completed within 60 days. The gavel's final strike echoed through the courtroom like thunder, officially ending their marriage and beginning the consequences that would follow them both for years to come. Outside the courthouse, Channel 7 News had positioned cameras to capture interviews with the principal parties in what their reporter called a cautionary tale about financial infidelity in the digital age. The dominoes fell with the mathematical precision that Micah had calculated but never quite believed would feel so satisfying. Channel 7's evening news coverage turned Serena's betrayal into Atlanta's cautionary tale about financial infidelity, complete with courthouse footage of her trying to hide behind oversized sunglasses while reporters shouted questions about her ATM husband comment. By Friday, Serena's marketing firm had terminated her employment. Corporate environments didn't tolerate employees whose personal scandals reflected poorly on company reputation, especially when those scandals involved theft and public humiliation. Her credit score plummeted as unpaid bills mounted, and bankruptcy became the only viable option for someone facing six-figure restitution requirements. Javon's collapse was even more spectacular. Reed's collection team stripped his fitness studio of equipment before the lease termination could be finalized. The hard money lender's personal asset seizure extended to his apartment furnishings, his remaining car, and even the Rolex that had symbolized his fraudulent success. Within 30 days of the court judgment, he was working at a big box gym for $15 per hour, sleeping on his cousin's couch, and dodging process servers pursuing additional civil judgments. Micah sold their Brookhaven house for $420,000, keeping 80% according to the divorce decree. After settling remaining mortgage obligations and legal fees, he cleared $180,000 in liquid assets, more than enough to start fresh in Charlotte, where a regional bank had offered him a senior analyst position with significant upward mobility. The Charlotte transition felt like emerging from a dark room into natural sunlight. Micah rented a modern loft downtown, close enough to walk to work, but far enough from Atlanta to avoid unwanted encounters with his former life. 6 months of legal warfare had taught him to value genuine simplicity over complicated relationships that required constant emotional maintenance. Meeting Alicia happened naturally at Park Road Books on a Saturday afternoon when they both reached for the same financial planning guide. She was a nurse practitioner at Presbyterian Hospital, recently divorced herself, with the kind of careful optimism that suggested someone who'd learned to trust carefully after being burned badly. "Good choice," she said, noting the book in his hands. "Though I recommend starting with the chapter on protecting yourself from financial partners who might not have your best interests at heart." Their first coffee conversation lasted 3 hours. Unlike Serena, Alicia talked openly about money, debt, goals, and the mistakes she'd made trusting someone who'd viewed her salary as community property while keeping his own income strictly separate. She appreciated Micah's cautious approach to financial transparency and his insistence on maintaining separate accounts during early dating. "I learned the hard way that love doesn't automatically equal financial compatibility," Micah explained during their third date. "Trust has to be earned gradually, not given automatically because someone says the right words." 9 months later, driving through Atlanta on business, Micah stopped at a Kroger near his old neighborhood for bottled water. The woman working checkout register 3 looked familiar until he realized he was staring at his former wife. Serena had gained weight, lost the expensive haircut, and acquired the weary expression of someone whose grand plans had collapsed into minimum wage reality. She looked up as he approached with his purchase, recognition flickering across her face like a computer slowly processing unexpected data. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the distance between customer and cashier, between the life he'd built and the life she'd destroyed. "That'll be $2.59, she said quietly, her voice carrying none of the confident manipulation he remembered. Micah handed her exact change without comment. As he turned to leave, Serena spoke again. "I know you probably think I got what I deserved." He paused, considering his response carefully. "I think you got exactly what you chose. The difference is important." Walking back to his car, Micah felt the satisfying weight of closure settling around his shoulders like a well-tailored jacket. Serena and Javon had convinced themselves they were victims of bad luck, of circumstances beyond their control, of a system that had somehow failed them. They would never understand that every consequence they'd suffered was simply the mathematical result of decisions they'd made freely. They thought they'd been playing a game with a fool who'd never discovered their deception. They never realized the fool was smarter than they were, and he'd been keeping score the entire time. True character reveals itself not in moments of comfort, but when people believe they can act without consequences. Micah's story reminds us that patience and strategic thinking often triumph over immediate emotional reactions. While betrayal wounds deeply, responding with intelligence rather than rage creates lasting justice that satisfies both the heart and mind. What would you have done in Micah's position? Confronted them immediately or chosen the path of silent strategic revenge? Would you have shown Serena mercy when you found her at that checkout counter? Or do you believe she received exactly the justice she deserved? Share your thoughts and hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.